Greetings, Sentinels fans. What? I want to talk to you about character development. You see, in the game Sentinels of the Multiverse, we get to see the characters at multiple points in their lives, and how they evolve. And I think today we should talk about one of the more interesting ones. So let's go over the life of Legacy in the game of Sentinels of the Multiverse, shall we? I will be looking into the variants of the different decks and showing how the cards follow the lore, as well as how cards reference each other. With Paul Parsons, we don't actually start with the base version, but instead Greatest Legacy. And he's not called that because he's the best one, though many players think he is, but instead because he was part of the quote-unquote greatest generation. He is a veteran of World War II and the father of the popular Paul Parsons, America's Finest Legacy. Grandpa Parsons had his long career as a hero in the war, hence the use of the helmet, even though he probably doesn't need one. He does, however, get killed by Ivan Ramanat, aka Baron Blade, in revenge for the death of his own father. This, of course, leads us to the main legacy, America's Finest Legacy, Paul Parsons, who didn't really participate in any wars. Instead, he donned the suit and cape of a superhero, helping form the Freedom Five and fighting injustice everywhere. He would marry a senator, and there she is, being damseled over there, and fathered a child, a girl named Pauline Felicia Parsons. Pauline would spend ages as a kid, then as a teenager, then grow into her powers. When Legacy was defeated by Grand Warlord Voss, Pauline took up the mantle of America's newest legacy for a while. Though when Paul got better, she hung up the cape, desiring to have a normal life for a little while. Post-Oblivion, however, she would take up the cape again, as Beacon in the Miss Storm timeline, and taking over her father's role as Legacy in the RPG timeline. Paul gave up his cloak in the RPG timeline to become Heritage, a mentor and teacher for future heroes. However, in another timeline, things would turn out very differently. Baron Blade attacked the Wagner Mars base in a gambit to draw out the heroes. Pauline Felicia Parsons answered the call and went after him, and Baron Blade killed her. Up until then, Legacy never truly hated Blade, even for the murder of his father, but the death of his daughter was too far. He stopped Blade from ever hurting anyone ever again. Then he changed himself into the Iron Legacy. And here's where things get interesting. If you were to take a look at Iron Legacy's deck, you might notice that all his cards reference Legacy's deck, many of them being direct inversions. Final Evolution is an inversion of Legacy's next evolution, Beatdown an extension of Takedown, and so on. Galvanized in particular is interesting because it references the art of the Legacy ring, but uses the wording of the base power for Legacy. I'd also like to point out that Former Allies is an inversion of Legacy's Bolster Allies, because it probably shows best how far he's fallen. Bolster Allies is a one-shot that allows all heroes to draw a card, while Former Allies forces the heroes to discard a card and allows Iron Legacy to play another card. This changes from a fully selfless card to a fully selfish card. Former Allies also has what I consider to be the saddest artwork in the game, taking one of the happiest images in the game and invalidating it so completely by dropping it into the mud and rain. There is also Vigilance and Iron Justice, which I think still have connections to Legacy's deck, but certainly more tenuous ones. Vigilance I connect to Danger Sense, since it's a similar theme, but the effects aren't connected. Heck, the Danger Sense effect is already covered on the front side of Iron Legacy's character card. It's Iron Justice, however, that seems to have no connection to any card in Legacy's deck until you look at two different things. The fact that there is a sound effect in the art, and the flavor text that says, "Brute force is all you savages understand," which leads me to think that it connects to this card. Thok, not to be confused with a popular four-letter word, is a card with a sound effect in the art, and talks about brute force in the flavor text. See right there? He's thocking that guy good. When he's evil, he stops thocking people and starts Cthulhuing people. I'm gonna leave it up to you as to whether or not that is less suggestive or more. Any other similarities off the top of my head? Well, Iron Legacy has the same hit points as base Legacy, and his reverse side covers the motivational charge attack by hitting someone and healing. Also, his Armor Fortitude card has its title reference Legacy's Fortitude, but the art and intent was more about the Superhuman Durability card, to talk about the one big hit he can take before being affected again. Another thing worth noting is the bios. If you look in the Multiverse tab on the app, or in the rulebook in the Shattered Timelines expansion, you'll find a biography for Iron Legacy. And weirdly enough, this biography makes more sense if you don't have some of the context. If you know nothing about the lore, you can just assume that the whole thing is true. However, if you know the context of the lore, things start to fall apart. Essentially, the bio is split into two parts. The first is talking about how Baron Blade killed Legacy and therefore Pauline Felicia Parsons mourns the death of her father, but still takes up the mantle of Legacy and continues to further her family duties. But the second half talks about the same event, but it was young Legacy that faced off against Baron Blade, and Baron Blade killed her. This of course caused Legacy to internalize everything, say that he is the last of the Legacies, and that he now has a duty to stop all crime that he can before he passes away, which leads him down the path of pretty much taking over the world. The second half is fine. That is the canonical story for the Iron Legacy timeline. The first half you might assume is the endpoint for the canonical timeline, but that's a falsehood. And you'll already know this if you have the Stolen Legacy one-shot for the Sentinels RPG. The Stolen Legacy one-shot shows Legacy retiring from his duties and passing the mantle to Felicia. Now I think I can explain what's going on here, at least a little bit. You see, there were multiple endpoints that were planned for the game. C&A of Greater Than Games did not know if Sentinels was going to be successful, but they planned for the best and hoped they can at least get to the Shattered Timelines expansion, which was the expansion where Iron Legacy was released. So by that logic, if Shattered Timelines was expected to be the endpoint, then it makes sense to hint that Legacy dies at that event. However, as we all know, that did not happen. Sentinels was successful and managed to make more expansions. They made the Vengeance, the Wrath of the Cosmos, and the Villains of Multiverse expansion, as well as the Oblivion expansion. After that, they expected the Oblivion story to be the one where Legacy would die. But in the end, they decided against it, thinking that it might be more appropriate to have Legacy become Heritage in the RPG timeline. And I do think that is better, but it does invalidate that first half of the bio, so it does create a little bit of confusion after the fact. But yeah, they did plan on Legacy dying in 2 different points of the timeline, but as of now, there doesn't seem to be any plan on killing him at any point. And of course, Pauline already has the Legacy ring now, so she is Legacy. But yeah, that is that whole bit. Now I would mention the Freedom 5 promo variant for Legacy, but I am saving that for when I decide to talk about Baron Blade in this way. If I decide to do that episode, I think I'm gonna have a lot of fun with it. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you next week. Take care, friends. This of course leads us to the... And because this is completely off script, I am not looking forward to editing this bit. Stammers and all.